Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And today we have a very special guest with us. He is a host and producer of a cricket podcast called The CRIQAZI, Adam Bell. And today we'll be discussing the heist that New Zealand has pulled off. They've defeated England by 5 wickets quite miraculously. And we'll be talking about that game in detail and a brief preview of the Australia-Pakistan game on this volume of
CRIQAZI Diaries.
Have a look at that, miles up, oh, it's nearly taken someone out in the stands. That was a flat 6 right under the stand there, the George Giffen stand, up into the members, and it went like a rocket. Well, wicket 24.
Welcome to the show, Adam. First of all, it's an absolute privilege to have you over here, and many congratulations on the win. New Zealand have made their first ever T20 World Cup final, and they won arguably the most thrilling contest of this T20 World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a game. I guess there were stages during that New Zealand run chase that it looked like New Zealand were out of it. Obviously, but for most fans, wouldn't have had much faith when Williamson and Williamson Guptill were dismissed early. But look, New Zealand were able to hang in that match and able to take the match, right down to the final overs before Daryl Mitchell taking it home for the Black Caps.
Yeah, so 60 were actually required in the last 5 overs, and then they had 7 wickets in hand, and Liam Livingstone literally bowled the over of his life. He removed Glenn Phillips and only gave away 3 runs. At that point, New Zealand required 57 runs with 6 wickets in hand, and they only had 4 overs remaining, and I personally thought this game was dead and buried. What were your feelings, and did you still have hope at that point?
I did. Look, Jimmy Neesham has proved himself to be a great finisher over the last few years with the Black Caps, and also Daryl Mitchell was at the crease. But it was 57 runs required of 24 balls. That is a tough ask. And in the end of it, New Zealand ended up winning the game with 1 over to spare, which was absolutely incredible considering the amount of runs it required of the last 4 overs. And it was just some fantastic, power hitting by Jimmy Neesham, firstly off that over of Chris Jordan, who dropped a couple short. He didn't quite get his length right, and Jimmy Neesham just dispatched him for those 2 big sixes, and also Daryl Mitchell at the end to finish the match off with consecutive sixes of Wokes and then a 4 to end the match. So it was like an incredible last few over. It was just incredible match.
Absolutely, and you alluded to both of those players. Of course, Daryl Mitchell. Talk to me about this guy, Adam, because he wasn't an opener at all. He was a makeshift opener, and that proved to be a really useful strategy by Kane Williamson. He smashed an unbeaten 72 of 47. First, he stabilized the innings, consolidated, and in the end, he just went berserk. And then also James Neesham. Of course, we've all known his tweets and how funny he can be with his humor, but I honestly feel he is not talked about enough in world cricket, because I think he's a fantastic finisher, and as an all-rounder, I think New Zealand have really struck gold over here, especially if you compare to the days of Corey Anderson. He scored pretty much the best 27 of his life in 11 deliveries, completely changed the face of the game, and don't forget the last over he bowled. He also took a wicket. So is there anything James Neesham can do? And Daryl Mitchell, do you think he's going to be a mainstay now as New Zealand opener?
Okay, well, firstly, Daryl Mitchell. So Daryl Mitchell used to play for my local association. So I've always been a big fan of Daryl Mitchell. So he used to play for Northern Districts. So I'm based in Hamilton, which is part of the Northern Districts region in Hamilton. And he's moved down to Canterbury. But I still think he's an incredible player. And I'm still a massive fan, even though he changed allegiances. Look, over the last year or so since he's come into the New Zealand side, he's just performing given the opportunity. He scored 70-odd on his test debut, got 100 against Pakistan last season, and got a one-day 100 against Bangladesh as well early in the year that some might have forgotten about. But, since he's come into the New Zealand side, he has looked every little bit an international cricketer. He's been fantastic. Look, it was a little bit surprising when I heard the news that he was opening the batting for New Zealand in the T20 World Cup. He's not a known opening batsman for Canterbury and beforehand with Northern Districts. And from my knowledge, he has never opened the batting for a domestic side in T20 cricket in New Zealand. So, yeah, it was an absolute massive surprise. However, here's a guy that is really adaptable. So in some regards, it's not surprising that he's played well in this World Cup, because he's a guy that's always been able to handle the pressure at domestic level. He's got a really good defence, and has shown in the last few overs against England, he can strike the ball as clean as anybody in the New Zealand side, which I think probably surprised a few people.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely surprised. I mean, I had followed him a bit and I knew he was a quality cricketer, but to come and bat like that as opener on these sort of wickets, I think that's very, very commendable. And again, Jimmy Neesham, I'm a huge fan and I knew he was capable of this. And I really think that more franchise teams should be picking him up. And this guy is actually serious business. I remember he scored a wonderful 50, went unbeaten versus Pakistan in the 2019 Cricket World Cup as well. And I was actually at that ground. So that was also a great performance. And one other guy I want to talk about, Adam, is Devon Conway. He's had an amazing start to international cricket. Across all formats, he has excelled. And today, even though he scored 46 of 38 deliveries, at that time, the need of the hour was to take the game deep. We've seen how important that is in the past. MS Dhoni was really good at it. Shoaib Malik does that well. How crucial do you think that knock from Conway was?
Oh, it was massive. I mean, New Zealand lost 2 early wickets, and at that stage, New Zealand couldn't afford to lose any more wickets. Also, the other dilemma for Devon Conway was to ensure that the run rate never got out of hand either. Because the run rate at the start of the innings was 8.5. New Zealand were going at 4 runs and over for the first 4 or so overs. So when he came in, he had to not only stabilise the innings by not getting out, but he also had to ensure that he got the run rate going. And I thought the way he played the spinners, in particular, Rashid, was fantastic. And a couple of shots through the cover was superb. He's just a guy that knows his game. He's great at placing the ball between the gaps. There was that tremendous 6. I can't remember who it was off. It was like a wristy kind of West Indian extravagant shot that went over point, which was absolutely fantastic. And that kind of got the Black Caps kind of going. And from that point onwards, New Zealand started to get a bit of momentum. When Daryl Mitchell and Conway got together, they were able to ensure that the run rate didn't balloon too much and able to keep wickets intact, rotate the strike, hit the boundaries when needed. And I think that was a crucial partnership, because without those two guys creating that partnership, it would have ensured or meant that England could have got into the New Zealand middle order before getting into those crucial stages of the match. So I think it was a fantastic partnership that kind of allowed New Zealand to set up the game and then allow guys like Jimmy Neesham to come in and finish the job. Obviously with Daryl Mitchell at the end. Carried his bat.
Yep, I agree. I think it was a very, very crucial knock. Of course, Daryl Mitchell also did that job with him, and in the end, he finished the game. It's a game of fine margins, Adam, and there were a few instances in this game that really caught my attention. One, of course, was Neesham refusing that single, or I think it might have been Mitchell, actually, who said, let's not take this single. And then also that almost brilliant effort from Johnny Bairstow. We've seen it before from England in the same tournament, and this time he just brushed the rope with his knee. There were shades of Trent Boult of 2019 in that. And then also Chris Jordan almost saved a 6, but he just parried it onto the rope. So I think just those fine margins, had they gone the other way, the result might have been different. And how crucial do you think those have turned out to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Just on that, the single that wasn't taken, but I think that just shows the trust in the Black Caps. That they trust their mates to do the job. Just in regards to Johnny Bairstow, I mean, what a crucial moment that was. I mean, I feel if Jimmy Neesham would have got out at that point, I think the match would have definitely swung in England's favour. Not only the 6 runs, but just getting the wicket at that crucial stage, and then having a new batsman having to come out and then rebuild. And that probably would have taken a few balls for the new batsman, which would have been Mitchell Santner, to kind of get himself in. And then the run rate increases, and then more pressure goes on Daryl Mitchell. So, I think at that time, that was a vital moment in the match. You think about these big games between teams that are evenly matched. It comes down to fine margins, and we saw there that Johnny Bairstow just touched the rope before releasing the ball. At the time when I was watching at home, I did think, oh, that's out. That was my first instinct. But then we saw Johnny Bairstow's reaction, and he wasn't 100% sure that he'd flipped the ball back in time. And then obviously the replays show that indeed he was touching the rope. And as you point out, shades of Trent Boult in the famous 2019 Cricket World Cup.
Yep, I do think that was the turning point of that game, because had Neesham got dismissed over there, things might have looked different. And then, of course, I don't think there was much fault from England over here. I mean, of course, Chris Jordan, Wokes and Adil Rashid, you'd expect these guys to deliver, but they went for 57 runs in 3 overs. So credit to Mitchell and Neesham, 100%. But with respect to Eoin Morgan's captaincy, there were a few things that I quite didn't understand. One thing was that why did he not bowl Moeen Ali, especially when Neesham came onto the crease. You saw how Neesham was dismissed by Hafiz's first delivery. He's a left-hander. That's an option that could have been used. And then also, I don't understand why Morgan promoted Moeen ahead of himself, because it was a left-left combination at that point. And you just feel that the England captain would back himself to like grind that innings out. So what's your take on both of those decisions?
Just the first thing in terms of Moeen Ali not bowling, that is really surprising, especially Moeen Ali turning the ball away from the left-handed batsman. So Jimmy Neesham, one of his go-to shots is over mid-wicket, and we know how he's a powerful striker of the ball. So obviously hitting the ball against the spin is a lot harder option for him. Absolutely. I just didn't understand why he didn't bowl Moeen Ali at that stage. And we saw with Adil Rashid, with his leg spin of the ball turning into the left hand, it was such an easier option for Jimmy Neesham. And then obviously we saw with the googly was the delivery that ended Jimmy Neesham's innings. So I'm really surprised that Moeen Ali didn't bowl more overs. Look, in terms of the batting side of it, look, Moeen Ali did bat up the order against South Africa, and he did it well. So maybe there was the thought of that past performance in the previous match on the reason why he was promoted ahead on Morgan. Also, Morgan's form hasn't been so great in T20 cricket over the last year or so. So maybe there was the thought there that Moeen Ali's the one in form and get him early on to get the innings going. I also think in terms of the England approach, I'm so surprised at Liam Livingstone. I know that he's there to be the finisher, but he only faced 10 balls. Outside Josh Buttler, he's the most powerful batsman in that lineup. He was given 10 deliveries. There was a thought for me that maybe Malan and Moeen Ali could have stepped on the accelerator a little bit earlier than that they did. I mean, they really kind of started to try to accelerate around the 14th, 15th over. And if they may have tried to push a little bit harder around the 11th over or so, maybe they could have ended up getting a bigger total. And in the end, Liam Livingstone may have had a little more opportunities to bat and get more balls to face. And in the end of it, England got such a long batting lineup. But in the end, Sam Billings, who was brought into Jason Roy, didn't even bat.
Absolutely, that is baffling. And I do get the rationale, sending Moeen Ali ahead of himself, Morgan, because Moeen had been successful for the Chennai Super Kings as well, and he batted up the order. Let's track back a bit. I want to go to the first innings, and you mentioned Jos Buttler. Of course, he is an absolute powerhouse, arguably the best hitter off a white ball, and he was in belligerent form as well. He's the leading run scorer in this T20 World Cup. He scored a century, and he was the danger man. And he is a great improviser. He really gets those sweeps going, reverse sweeps. But it was one reverse sweep too many this time. Southee trapped him, LBW. And do you think that was a big turning point in that first innings? Because had Jos Buttler got going, this game could have ended up in a very, very different place.
Yeah, absolutely. As Daryl Mitchell showed in New Zealand innings, if you have a batsman who's in and he bats deep, they have the ability at that point, if they've got the power game, to really capitalise in the death overs. So if Jos Buttler, who we know is one of the most powerful batsmen in all cricket, if he could have seen off Sothee's spell, and if he would have been able to bat the majority of the 20 overs, we know the kind of power he possesses. We know, as you pointed out, he's got great improvisation shots as well. He could have really taken the game away from New Zealand if he would have been able to bat deeper than what he did. But full credit to Sothee, he kept his nerve. He was able to, trap him LBW, and I think that was the pressure that was actually put on Jos Buttler, because Jos Buttler was ended up with 29 of 24 balls. Now, for Jos Buttler, that isn't a fast strike rate compared to his lofty standards. For most batsmen around the world, 29 of 24, would be acceptable. So I think New Zealand did a great job in being able to contain Jos Buttler and then forcing him to try to improvise. And as we saw, unfortunately, he missed and was given an LBW.
Yup. And then, of course, Woakes then removed Guptill and Kane Williamson early on in the New Zealand innings. Two of New Zealand's most experienced batsmen and pretty much the spearheads with respect to chasing targets and setting up scores. And how much confidence will New Zealand have gained that after being 13 for 2 in a big game, pressure game, semi-final of a World Cup, losing Kane Williamson and Martin Guptill, and then actually going on to chase the total successfully with 1 over to spare? What is this going to do for the confidence of the Black Caps going into the final?
It's a great question. I think the Black Caps will have got a lot of confidence out of this match. And as you point out, under pressure early, what it's actually shown is that this Black Cap side possesses a lot of players who are able to deliver in pressure situations. We've mentioned Daryl Mitchell, and what an innings that he played. He was, along with Devon Conway, with a glue in this innings. What we actually saw was a very systematic approach, very similar to, say, Pakistan. Try to build an innings, try to have guys in the middle stages, develop a base, and then at the end you have your power hitters or your finishers do the job. Like with Asif Ali for Pakistan, you know, you have Rizwan and Babar at the top, whose job is to bat deep, and then you've got your finishers to do the job. Like Pakistan, New Zealand has a middle order that can also do that job as well if we lose early wickets. And as you see, you know, the parallels with Pakistan are, we've got Shoaib Malik and Hafiz that can kind of do that job if the openers are removed early. And I think that's the key, is that if you lose early wickets, you need to rebuild. You cannot lose any more wickets. You've got to ensure that you pace the innings correctly. Obviously, you've got to be scoring runs at a good rate, but it's all about preserving those wickets for the final death overs and then giving confidence and trust in your finishers to do the job in the last 4 or 5 overs. And as we've seen, if you've got wickets in hand with 5 overs to go, you can score 10, 12, 15 runs an over and really make some hay in that period. But it's all about keeping those wickets intact, because we've seen during this World Cup, some teams have been 3, 4 down within 6, 7, 8, 9 overs. And once that happens, you've lost so much wickets. Majority of your batsmen are in the shed. And when it comes down to the final overs to accelerate, well, you just don't have the resources to do so. Or you don't have a batsman that is in to kind of capitalise at that stage. And I think that's where New Zealand, like Pakistan, have got a really stable base. They know that if they've got early wickets, they know exactly the game plan that they want to play. And they have trust in their finishers at that point to do the job. And we've seen in this World Cup, you know, teams like Australia, for example, trying to bat too aggressively too early and lose wickets and bring Glenn Maxwell up to number 4 or number 5, I should say, and thinking that, you know, he's going to hit their way out of trouble. But at that stage, it's about trying to preserve wickets and develop a partnership. And I think that's the thing that really struck me in this match from New Zealand, is that we have confidence in all of our batsmen to play to the strategy that we want to.
That's a very interesting parallel you've drawn there between New Zealand and Pakistan. And I like that, you know, you speak of building up a solid base and then going berserk in the last 5. And it's quite contrary to what other people believe should be the right approach of going gung-ho in the power play and then, you know, just keeping that momentum up. And it's not so easy on these sort of tracks. And I think New Zealand have done a great job to assess the conditions and apply themselves. And that's just what makes this team so great. Talk to me about Liam Livingstone a bit, Adam. He, of course, has excelled in the PSL. We all know his ability to really hit the ball out of the park. His power hitting prowess is out of this world. But add to that the versatility he's shown with his bowling. He can bowl offies. He can be a leg spinner. And then today, I think it was his best bowling performance in his career. 2 for 22 in 4 overs. Definitely England's standout bowler. How impressed are you with this bloke?
I've got to admit, I love him as a cricketer. For me, he's a bit of a reincarnation of Boom Boom and Freddie. You know, he's got that same kind of energy. He loves hitting big sixes that are huge. Obviously, he bowls leg break deliveries as well. Like, he bowled a superb spell, didn't he? I mean, he kept the New Zealand batsmen and knots. And that over, as you point out, that where he just missed Glenn Phillips, at that stage could have been a game changer. And look, he bowled brilliantly, as you point out. He bowls not only his leg breaks but off breaks as well. He's learned from both the quality spinners that are in his side. He seems like a guy that's comfortable under pressure as well. And the other great thing as well with a leg spinner, you've got to be brave. And if batsmen are coming at you, you've got to be able to hold your nerve. And I feel that he had that during that match. He seems like a guy that's really confident in his game. And then when it comes to pressure situation, he's got a real cool head. And he doesn't get too flustered. And we saw that not only with the bat during his international career thus far, but also with the ball as well. Look, I thought he bowled superbly, especially when you consider he's not like a frontline spinner, but he was superb.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super impressed with him. And now I just want to touch a bit about New Zealand's fielding effort. Of course, Kane Williamson took an absolutely stunning catch to dismiss Johnny Bairstow overall. But after that, Adam, I thought New Zealand's effort in the field was quite sluggish. And they missed about 4 chances. And had they taken those chances, you know, they could have wrapped England up earlier and maybe would not have conceded 167. You don't associate this sort of fielding performance from New Zealand. They're generally brilliant in the field, and they've shown exactly that to us all tournament. And do you think they'll have to be better in the final? Because today they got away with it, but they might not get away with it in the final.
Yeah, absolutely. Up until this point in the tournament, New Zealand has been one of the best fielding sides, taken some fantastic catches. I remember the Southee catch against Scotland, Adam Milne taking a catch in the last game against Afghanistan, and and Kane Williamson has taken some fantastic catches during the tournament as well. Look, I think it's just pressure. And I think at that point in the game, England was surging in terms of run rate. I think for the first time in this tournament, apart from against Pakistan, the New Zealand side had actually had some pressure applied to them. And I think when you're under pressure, that is when you can make mistakes. And I think it was all down to the pressure, not obviously technical ability, because we know that this Black Cap side is a great fielding side. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the final, look, it's about being able to do the basics right, but also being able to handle pressure as well. And you're right, when it comes down to it, the final and big matches, and you need to take those half chances, you need to be able to handle that pressure. And it's an area that the Black Caps are going to have to address going into the final, because we all know these big matches are won and lost by such small margins, and whether it's a great catch, great piece of fielding, that can be the difference between winning and losing.
Very true. And those drop chances did hurt them. Moeen Ali, of course, especially that chance that Conway dropped of him early on. He did cash in. He went on to score an unbeaten 51 of 37 deliveries. He was partnered for the most part by Dawid Malan, who not too long ago was the number one batsman in T20 international cricket. He scored 41 of 30. But I just felt that they just couldn't get a move on in that innings, and they missed out a lot. There were a lot of bad deliveries which they could have really utilized, but they couldn't. And maybe that's where England fell short. What will you say?
I remember thinking at the end of the innings that England were about 10 or so runs short. I think they could have pulled the trigger earlier on. As good as Malan and Moeen Ali were, I think, as you point out, they didn't really put the foot down. They didn't really cash in on some of those bad balls. They didn't really look to accelerate until around the 15th over. And when you've got batsmen in the shed, and we talk about Liam Livingstone earlier, that he only faced 10 balls. Chris Wokes, you still have Billings in the shed. You still have Adil Rashid who can bat. Chris Jordan can hit a long ball. They had so much batting in the shed, and you wonder whether England actually didn't quite pace their innings correctly. I mean, sure, on the surface, it looks like Moeen Ali played a great innings, and he did. He hit some great shots and is such a clean hander of the ball, but I wonder whether England could have just gone a little bit earlier. I sense that England's approach earlier on was about trying to see Tim Southee and Trent Boult off and not giving that early advantage to New Zealand. And I think as a result, the earlier run rate from England wasn't as high as what we probably would expect under normal circumstances. And I think that was a great job by Tim Southee in particular. Obviously, Trent Boult got hit around a bit today. He's been great during the tournament, but it was his day that he was attacked. But I think when you look at the overall performance of England's side, they were kept in check for most of the innings apart from the last 5 or so. I think they could have easily pulled the trigger earlier. And then at that stage, obviously, you'd still have guys like Liam Livingstone in the shed to do the damage. You know, I think when it comes down to it, they didn't use all the resources that they had available to them. And I think as a result, you know, scoring 166 at the end of the day was a losing score. They could have possibly pushed for, 10 or 12 more runs, which might have been the difference between winning and losing that game.
Very un-England-like, isn't it, with the philosophy and mindset that Eoin Morgan has infused into this team over the last 5-6 years. You just did not expect to see this, and it did ultimately cost them in the end. I'll talk about New Zealand's bowling effort as well. Tim Southee, of course, was the pick of the bowlers, 1 for 24 in his 4 overs. As you mentioned, Trent Boult went for quite a few today, but again, it's T20 cricket, and this happens to bowlers every now and then. And we all know Trent Boult is quality. And this senior pace bowling duo has been on fire for New Zealand in this tournament and also for like a decade. They're honestly really, really underrated when we talk about new bowling pairs across formats in cricket. So let's talk a bit about this pair and how crucial it is for them to perform in the final if New Zealand are to win this. And just one small additional question on top of this. I know this didn't end up making a difference at all in the game as New Zealand won, but were you surprised that Kane Williamson only gave Mitchell Santner 1 over?
Yes, I was surprised that he only gave him 1 over. However, you had Moeen Ali and David Malan who batted the majority of the innings, and there was a thought with the ball coming into the left-handed batsman that he probably wasn't going to be the right option to bowl to those 2 guys who were especially strong over mid-wicket. So, a little bit like with New Zealand's innings where Eoin Morgan decided not to bowl Moeen Ali, it was all about matchups in this match. And maybe when we analyse the match overall, we'll see that maybe both captains in the end of it decided to use too much analysis about matchups rather than actually just bowling their best bowlers. So that's my thoughts about Mitchell Santner. And he's been bowling well during the World Cup. He hasn't taken an awful lot of wickets, but he's been very, very economical. Just in regards to Tim Southee and Trent Boult, they're New Zealand's highest wicket takers in this tournament, and both guys have been around for a while now. Both play for Northern Districts as well, grew up together playing age group cricket. So they're a fine combination in all formats for the Black Caps. They're guys that I think know their roles in the team. I think Tim Southee in particular has bowled superbly in this tournament. He's had a few problems in the shorter form at the death, but I feel like in this tournament, Kane Williamson's used him appropriately, and that's by using his overs up earlier on. He's best with the new ball. He's best opening the bowling. So bowl him at the death if that's not his strength. You know, a little bit like with England with Chris Wokes earlier on in the tournament when Tyrone Mills was available. You know, if your bowler is best at the beginning of the innings, where you utilise their skills, not at the death. However, Tim Southee has shown also that he can bowl at the death, but he has had some issues over the last few seasons. A series against India where he really, really struggled. And a lot of people thought he shouldn't be in the New Zealand T20 side, but he's always shown his value with the new ball. In terms of Trent Boult, look, Trent Boult is a great T20 bowler. You know, he's regularly playing for his franchise in the IPL. He's developed into one of the best white ball bowlers in the world. Great up front, great at the death. I think he's superb. I think along with Tim Southee, New Zealand's two best bowlers in all formats. Lots of test wickets, lots of cricket left in them, and probably will go down as two of New Zealand's best ever bowlers behind Sir Richard Hadlee.
Definitely. I mean, I'm a huge fan of both. And even in Test cricket, I really, really love that new ball partnership. So let's talk a bit about New Zealand as a whole, Adam. Of course, when you think of New Zealand of old, they were always a unit of 11 cricketers, and you wouldn't really call an individual in that team world class. They would always punch above their weight and just do better as a cohesive unit. But this New Zealand team, if we look at them for the last 6 years, you've got the 2015 50 over World Cup final. You've got the 2016 T20 World Cup semi. You've got the 2019 50 over World Cup final. We all know how that ended. Technically, New Zealand never lost that game. And the reigning World Test champions. I don't think this is a team which can be considered a dark horse anymore. I definitely think they're contenders, and they should definitely be talked about in that manner. I think they deserve that respect. And do you think they've got all bases covered? And is New Zealand going to bring this trophy home?
I'm not sure whether New Zealand's going to bring the trophy home, because I think whoever we play in the final will give New Zealand a tough run. Obviously, at the time of this recording, we don't know who New Zealand's going to be facing. But I will say one thing. I think the New Zealand side over the last 6 years or so has really developed into a great unit under Kane Williamson. And we saw the New Zealand side under Brendan McCullum playing a real exciting brand of cricket. And a lot of the guys that are in this Black Cap side were players under Brendan McCullum's captaincy. And we think about Trent Boult, Tim Southee, Kane Williamson, other three vital cogs to this Black Cap side. And I think one of the things that New Zealand cricket have done over the last 5 6 years is have a certain amount of stability. We've kept a core group of players in the Test side. We've got a core group of players that not only play Test cricket but also on the one-day side. And we've also now got a core of players that play Test cricket and one-day cricket that are also on the T20 side. So there is a stability in New Zealand cricket at the moment. And then we've developed some really world-class players along the way. Cole Jamieson's emergence has been a great find for New Zealand cricket. We've seen Neil Wagner come into the side as well over the last 5 6 years. We've seen the impact that he's made. Obviously, the development of Trent Boult and Tim Southee, they started their cricket with New Zealand as young men, but now we've seen them as being senior members of the side, early 30s. So not only have they improved as well, but we've also developed some other players that have just slotted into the Black Caps. And then Devon Conway. I mean, what can I say about Devon Conway? For the years leading up to his debut for New Zealand, he's been setting the domestic competition alight like no other batsman, averaging, close to 50 in all formats, a guy that's able to adapt his game. We saw his incredible 200 on debut. He just seems like he's taken to international cricket like a duck to water. Had a great T20 series against Australia, and there was a game against Australia in Christchurch when New Zealand lost early wickets, and he got 90 odd in that match, and New Zealand ultimately won that match because of that innings. And it just shows you that this guy is just a cut above it. And you add those mainstays to New Zealand side, the Trent Boults, the Southees, the Kane Williamsons, and then you look at the side and you go, this side is starting to look complete. There are not a lot of holes in this New Zealand side at the moment. When I was growing up, New Zealand side had a few very, very good players, but a lot of unheralded kind of players. But this side at the moment has a lot of world-class players. I think a few guys that possibly don't get the recognition that they deserve still. We look at the numbers of Trent, Boult and Southee, and over the last few years, in all formats, they've been, superb. Kane Williamson, who is one of the best batsmen in the world, had a great 2019 Cricket World Cup as well with the bat. And also, we know his value in T20 cricket, not only with the bat, but his captaincy. So when I look at this Black Cap side, I don't see a lot of holes there. Like, I think that not only have New Zealand cricket been able to keep a core group of players, but then being able to integrate new players into the mix. And I think there's some real exciting times for the New Zealand side over the next few years. And, we've got guys like Ross Taylor, who didn't make the T20 side, who's still integral to our Test and ODI side. And they've been able to integrate guys like Glenn Phillips, who's been a very good performer in the CPL over the last couple of years, been the top scorer in that competition and played well in the Vitality Blast as well. So there are some really exciting times for New Zealand cricket. And I think the way management have been able to, as I said, keep core players, integrate new players, but also not lose that momentum, I think has been incredible. And I think that's the reason why New Zealand at the moment are in the T20 World Cup final, as well as being the reigning World Test champions and also having made the World Cup final in 2019. I think it's stability, and I think it's having faith in your processes and your players as well. And I think that's another thing that New Zealand cricket have, is we have a management system and a captain who believe in their players. And you look at a lot of other countries around the world where you have a lot of issues with selection, or guys that are only given a couple of matches and then discarded, and players are kind of in and out all over the place. Our guys trust players coming into the setup and they give them time to develop. Tim Southee, as good as he is now, you look at 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, he wasn't at that world-class standard. Not at that point. But he wasn't discarded by the New Zealand selectors. He wasn't discarded by New Zealand management. They decided to keep with him, knowing that he had the raw talent to become what he's become now. And I think it's about having faith in your players. And I think sometimes in a lot of other cricket cultures, there is the notion of, well, if someone isn't a world performer after a few matches, well, they're out. And I get that, especially countries with bigger populations where you have so many guys knocking on the door. And I think one of New Zealand's advantages in some respects is the fact that we have such a limited group of players that we're kind of, in some respects, we're forced to play players and allow them to develop and let them gain experience at the international level. And as we've seen, from many examples of a lot of guys that don't start off their international careers with a hiss and a roar, sometimes it takes some players a lot longer to develop. But if you give guys some trust and some confidence and give them experience, they will grow. And I think that's been the massive strength of the Black Caps over the last 5, 6, 7 or 8 years.
You brought a really interesting point over there of how New Zealand actually has this core group of players, and they're all format players, which you don't get to see a lot in international cricket these days. Of course, there's some standout performance in there. The Williamsons, the Southees, the Boults, and then you talked about continuity and having faith in your players, and you can definitely see that bear fruit for New Zealand. And I definitely do think that the management has done an awesome job. And if you ask me, over the last 6 years, I would say that New Zealand is the best team across all formats, no doubt about it. And also the fact that they're such a likable unit. They play the game in the correct spirit, and they're just a bunch of nice guys. And they're trying to prove to the world that nice guys can sometimes finish first. So all the best to New Zealand. Of course, they are one of my most favorite teams, definitely in international cricket. Before I end this video, Adam, I just want to talk a little bit about the second semi-final, Pakistan versus Australia. A big injury scare for Pakistan. Malik and Rizwan are apparently down with the flu, so here's to hoping that they make it tomorrow in the semi-final versus Australia. And then also there's another hoodoo over here. Pakistan has never defeated Australia in a World Cup knockout fixture. They have eradicated one hoodoo earlier in this tournament, the India one. So I'm hoping that they can do the same tomorrow with Australia. But when you look at this Australian team, your top 3 batters, David Warner, Aaron Finch and Mitchell Marsh, they're in form. Then you've got the likes of Glenn Maxwell, who is an absolute danger man, X-factor player. Stephen Smith, of course, even though he's not raved about in the T20 format, he's still Stephen Smith. Marcus Stoinis. And then you look at the bowlers. Stark, he's been off color over the last few years, but we've seen glimpses of Mitchell Stark at his very, very best in this tournament. Adam Zampa is an extremely underrated leg spinner. He's been having the tournament of his life, and he's showing the world just how good he actually is. Add to that Hazelwood and his nagging lengths, and Pat Cummins. He hasn't even come into form yet. So that is this really, really dangerous looking unit. And even though Pakistan has almost all bases covered, they've had 5 different man of the matches across their group games. They've won all 5, which is very un-Pakistan-like. They're usually mercurial and they have to galvanize themselves in order to perform. But in this tournament, you've seen that they've been extremely successful and consistent, which honestly, as a Pakistan fan, I'm not used to. And yeah, and then you think that, have they peaked too soon? Can Australia knock them out? It is a bit scary, especially with the injury rumors coming in. And I just don't know. I mean, my heart says Pakistan, but my mind is giving me like the double bluff right now. And I don't know, maybe it's just my Pakistan PTSD, because I know that a collapse just has to be around the corner. But then again, I look at the confidence with which this lot is playing, and I would say only Fakhar Zaman is the guy left in this team who hasn't performed. And even if you include his boundary riding, he's taken some phenomenal running catches, saved a lot of runs. I would say that they shouldn't have anything to worry about. They should be brave, express themselves. And I mean, I would back Pakistan over here, but I'm scared. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, the Australian side is scary on paper. And as you mentioned, there's some absolutely huge names in that side. And we look at the Australian side over the last year or so in T20 cricket, and they've really struggled. But they haven't played those series with a lot of their frontline players. David Warner, Steve Smith, and obviously, some of the bowlers as well have been available for some of those series. But all of a sudden, for this tournament, they've got everybody on deck. They're an interesting side for me because England completely pulverised them. And I remember thinking to myself, maybe this is the end of Australia. They just didn't look themselves in that game. For the first time in my life, I've seen an Australian side that they lack complete confidence. And that's not something that you think about when you think about Australian cricket sides. Australian cricket sides getting, bowled out or only just making 120 in a T20 game. But, England absolutely rocked that top order. But since then, they've been able to get some form under their belt. I think David Warner's innings against the West Indies is really ominous for any opponents of Australia. Throughout the tournament, he's been a little bit scratchy. But then when you look at the top run scorers in the tournament, he's in the top 5. Just like that. I haven't really thought it's been a vintage David Warner tournament, yet he still somehow scored some runs. So yeah, there are some ominous signs, but I think there are some danger players in that Australian side that can then really test Pakistan. And I know how you feel. You won 5 games in a row. It's a semi-final, and it's only one game, and it's not about being consistent in the tournament. It comes down to just one knockout game. Look, I still favour Pakistan. I think you've got to have faith. A little bit like New Zealand. And the way Pakistan approached the game is a lot different than what they've possibly approached T20s in the past. There's a lot of stability in that team. When we talk about players that play all formats, well, this Pakistan side have got a host of players that do play all formats. Rizwan, Baba, Shaheen Sharafredi, Hassan Ali. I mean, there is a core group of players there. I'm probably missing a few. But there are a few guys there that do make up the core of the Pakistan side across all formats. And it's a very, very exciting side. As we know, the top order of Pakistan looks very solid. Fakhar Zaman hasn't had an overly impressive tournament, but he's shown glimpses at times that he's ready to have a big performance. And I think his role in the side is really just to be that left-hand variation in that batting lineup. I think if he wasn't in the batting lineup, you'd be stuck with a lot of right-handers. So I think he does give a little bit of a balance to that top order that would normally be full of right-handers. And look, I think there's a lot to be excited about as a Pakistan fan. I really do. I think Shoaib Malik's comeback has been absolutely incredible. I can't believe there were so many people that didn't think he should have been included in the T20 World Cup squad. I remember having a chat with my fiancée Tasneem Samakhan, and we were talking about Shoaib Malik, and I said, look, I can't believe he is not in the squad. He's been great over the last few years, and he adds a lot of stability to the Pakistan middle order. Sure, he's over 40. Sure, Hafiz is over 40 as well. But these are guys that over the last few years, their form has been great. It's not like they're at the end of their career and their form is dipping, i.e. like a Chris Gale. These guys are in peak physical condition, and they've been great over the last few years. And I think they had a lot of stability to that side. And then you, as I said, you add in Asif Ali as well, Ahmad Wasim, who I think is one of the most underrated players in T20 cricket. I actually really enjoy watching him bat. I think he's very inventive. I think like a Jimmy Neesham, he can hit a long ball as well. I think people forget his striking ability in T20 cricket. And then we know he's a great T20 bowler as well. And at times during his career, he's been ranked the world's best T20 bowler. So I think there's a lot to like about this Pakistan side. I think the variation in their side, Shaheen Sharafredi has been great during the tournament. I mean, his 2 deliveries to open The World Cup were absolutely incredible. Shades of Wasim Akram 1992. I mean, you know, he's going to go down as one of Pakistan's greatest ever bowlers, in my opinion. He's that good, and he's only 20. I think he's only 21, and he's got plenty of years left to terrorise international batsmen. Hassan Ali hasn't had a great tournament thus far, but I think it's his energy and his overall competitive spirit that adds a lot of value to the Pakistan side. So, sure, I think Australia do possess a lot of threats, but I think the Pakistan side are playing with a lot of confidence. Like New Zealand, they know their strategy and they trust their processes and they believe in a game plan. And I think Australia, though, haven't really settled on that. I mean, although they beat the West Indies in the final game, they haven't really stuck to a game plan, I think, that has been consistently successful, unlike Pakistan. So I think from a Pakistan perspective, I think you've got to be very, 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 very confident. It's going to be obviously another tight game as well. When you get to these big games, margins of error between two teams decides the outcome of games. But I think, yeah, absolutely Pakistan are favourites. As you say, a little bit like England, if you get to these finals, it's only just one game and you're knocked out. I kind of think the format is a little bit unfair in a way, you know, that Pakistan can be unbeaten, you know, the whole way through up to the semis, and then one game they're knocked out, you know. Look, I'm backing Pakistan.
All right. I mean, your confidence is definitely rubbed off on me a bit. And I do believe in the abilities of these players. Of course, they've been phenomenal in this tournament. They've had extra motivation, I suppose, also because of everything that's gone down in Pakistan cricket over the last month or so. And I just really want to see Babar Azam bring in Mohammad Hafiz early on, and he can get Davy Warner. That, I think, could be a ploy that they could use successfully. But of course, Australia, again, the jitters as a fan, I think, are overruling my analysis. But regardless, I'm super proud of these boys, the way they've conducted themselves, extremely mature, extremely composed, said nothing controversial, and they've won hearts, not just cricket games. So here's to hoping that Pakistan do make it to the final and we get a New Zealand-Pakistan repeat, two of my favorite teams playing against each other. I couldn't ask for much more. But anyway, that brings us to an end. Thank you so much, Adam, for sparing the time. And of course, all of you guys, Adam does run his own podcast, The Cricketers. I'll leave a link in the description to that below. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, mate. Much appreciated.
All right, that's a wrap for volume 77, folks. If you enjoyed this volume, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon in order to be notified about all of my latest episodes. I'll catch you after the semi-final tomorrow. That's all for now. Kazi off the mic.
Have a look at that, Miles up, oh, it's nearly taken someone out of the stands. That was a flat six right under the stand there, the George Giffen stand, up into the members, and it went like a rocket.